An imminent bloodbath. That's how the UN envoy to Myanmar is describing the situation in the country, warning the risk of civil war is at an unprecedented scale. The official implored the UN Security Council to intervene using what she called potentially significant action. Her remarks came after the military launched airstrikes in Karen State for the first time in 20 years in retaliation for an earlier attack by ethnic Karen rebels. According to CNN on Tuesday, 6 people were killed and 11 were injured in the airstrikes. The Karen National Union, which controls an area in the southeast along the Thai border, seized a military base, killing 10 soldiers and detaining 8 others. The KNU says its actions were in response to appeals for help from opponents to the coup. Its armed faction is sending fighters to protect protesters while attacking Myanmar army positions and cutting off supply routes, with other armed groups vowing to join the protest movement if the military doesn't reverse course. Fears of a return to armed ethnic conflict in the ethnically diverse nation has led to an exodus of foreigners. According to Reuters Wednesday, the U.S. government has ordered all non-emergency government officials and their families to leave Myanmar. Germany and Norway are urging their nationals to avoid protest sites and come home when they can. Workers are also bearing the brunt of the violence. As the bloodshed continues, one local worker at a South Korean franchise bank was shot in the head, but it's unclear if she died. It's also unclear if she was targeted because she worked at a foreign-owned bank. So far, more than 520 people have died since the military overthrew the government of democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi on February 1st, halting Myanmar's decade-old experiment in democracy. 최정윤, 아리랑 뉴스.
Non-emergency U.S. government employees and their family members. The decision was taken to protect the safety and security of staff and their families, the State Department has said. The ordered departure status will be reviewed every month. Daily protests demanding the restoration of elected government have been met with tear gas, rubber bullets, and sometimes even live ammunition. More than 500 civilians have been killed in the weeks since the February 1st coup. 141 protesters were slaughtered on Saturday alone, the bloodiest day of the unrest. The United States, Britain, and the European Union have all imposed sanctions in response to the coup and the crackdown, but so far the diplomatic pressure has not persuaded the military to back down. Besides that international condemnation, the junta's violent response has also triggered threats of retaliation from some of Myanmar's ethnic armed groups. The bloodshed has angered some of Myanmar's 20 or so armed ethnic groups who control large parts of territory in Myanmar, mostly in the border regions. 3 of them, the Taang National Liberation Army, the Myanmar Nationalities Democratic Alliance Army, and the Arakan Army, have threatened to join the protesters unless the military eased off its violent crackdown. 2 other outfits, the Karen National Union and the Kachin Independence Army, have stepped up attacks on the military and the police.
You know, Saturday was actually a holiday in Myanmar called the Armed Forces Day. And, you know, whereas you would see a lot of countries sending notes of congratulations, it's been country after country kind of sending these notes calling basically the military a disgrace and saying, you know, the actions these kind of violence need to stop right now. You know, at least 114 people were killed on Saturday alone, including civilians that were taking part of demonstrations. The violence has exceeded beyond the protest itself, with security forces entering houses and shooting into homes. So it's just the violence has really just gotten quite bad on a day-to-day basis.
What sort of international?
Yeah, we've started to see the U.S. and allies, particularly in Europe, reacting with targeted sanctions. I don't think there's a sense at this moment that any wider sanctions would be of any benefit, as that would just plummet millions of people further into poverty. But targeted sanctions could be useful, as the military has a huge business wing, for example, in two owned companies that it runs. And so on Thursday, we had the U.S. and the UK both hit on those two major holding companies that are owned by the military that would block millions and millions of dollars already. There's been reporting earlier in the last month that the U.S. was able to block the military from gaining about $1 billion from withdrawing that kind of money. So this is a country that doesn't have a lot of cash on hand, so they could be useful, but to the extent to which they'll change the trajectory of the protest movement or the crackdowns is too early to say.
City of Dubai, despite the fear of lethal confrontation with security forces. Students, teachers and engineers took turns to demonstrate on the streets. This time the marches concluded without any incident. The small city has been a hotspot for anti-coup protests, with tens of thousands demonstrating in the early days of the protest movement. But repeated crackdowns and killings have led to a reduction in the number of protesters. Funerals were held across Myanmar. Over 114 people were killed by the Myanmar security forces in the bloodiest crackdown ever since the February 1st coup. This includes children. Long columns of mourners were seen at the grounds of a temple to honor a 33-year-old local man shot dead in the city of Myanmar, and mourners carried wreaths, flowers and honored the victims with a 3-finger salute. Several funerals were held in Yangon too. People gathered to mourn a 49-year-old man who was shot dead on Saturday. Friends and family played a song from the 1988 uprising with their hands raised in the 3-finger salute. That has become a common feature in these protests. In another corner of the same city, people gathered around the coffin of a 13-year-old boy. The victim's mother kept waiting beside the coffin while mourners sang revolution songs and raised the 3-finger salute there. Now, the northwestern city of Myanmar, the protesters dodged all the bullets, ran through the back alley of people's houses and brought the comrades back to safety. Now, according to a tally by Assistance Association for Political Prisoners Advocacy Group, at least 460 civilians have been killed since the coup, with at least 6 children between the ages of 10 and 16.
Suelo.